It is fight week in Las Vegas, and not just any fight week. It is UFC 264 fight week. It's a Conor McGregor fight week and a Dustin Poirier fight week. We won't take that away from him, but there's no question the biggest star in the sport is Conor McGregor, and anytime he's in action, it's a big deal. And you know it's a big deal because, John Morgan, I got Dan Tom with me, the MMA Junkie fight analyst who, man, what's it been, over a year since we've been able to get together and actually break down a fight in the flesh? None of this Zoom stuff and the Skype stuff. We can actually sit down in the flesh and talk about some fights. Dan, how's it going, man?
Good, man. I'm sorry. I wouldn't do that on any other occasion. I just have to make sure you're real because it feels good to be back. It feels so real.
Yeah, no doubt about it. By the way, we are deep inside the bowels of the UFC Apex, if you're wondering where we're at right now. I think, Dan, you wanted to call it the Boiler Room Breakdown, which I think is a pretty solid name there. But really, it's just the only place we could get space. There's media crawling all over. This finally feels like a big fight week again. I mean, we've had some pay-per-views, and obviously we went to Fight Island. I mean, we've had some big moments. But, man, the media turnout is there. The excitement is there. Like I said, I don't want to take away from Dustin Poirier, but when Conor McGregor fights, it's an event.
It is. It's pretty crazy, you know. We're usually here, you know, at the Apex where, like you said, they were going over to Fight Island. You were in the trenches of it, but, you know, maybe it takes a McGregor fight week to kind of make it happen. I don't want to say it's coincidence because I think that this company plans things for a reason. But like we were talking about before this even got started, John, and to kind of tip that cap, you know, give you a view behind the curtain. But it feels you know good to be back. It's not normal as of yet, but you know, like you were saying, the turnout from the fighters, fans, which will be coming later this week, media, good signs.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I mean, you know, I had a chance to speak with UFC President Dana White, and he's done some other interviews as well. Well, he's talked about what a big event this actually is, right? And the fact that more pre-buys than they've ever had in history, more celebrities are going to be in attendance. But it is starting to get that buzz. I mean, yes, don't get me wrong. Jacksonville, amazing. Houston, amazing. Phoenix, amazing. All those crowds have been amazing having people back. But we're here in Las Vegas for the trilogy. UFC 264, Poirier versus McGregor 3. Dan, let's just jump into this. Let's talk about just trilogies as a whole to start with, okay? Obviously, we're going to break down the fight itself. You know, we talk storylines. You talk actual X's and O's and about what's going to happen inside the cage. But I know you've gone back and you've kind of studied trilogies overall. We've actually had you listing out the best trilogies and your favorite trilogies. I just wonder, as a whole, are there any trends that you look at that you say, certainly, you know, this breaks down to Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor, but when you look at trilogy series as a whole, are there any trends or anything like that you've been able to glean from kind of going back and learning through trilogies that you say, hey, here's something you might want to think about as you're breaking down this?
Yeah, that's a great setup, John. You know, we don't have as much time as we'd like to get in MMA history, but the good thing about it is it combines those X's and O's and those storylines in kind of relevant fashion. So kind of answer to your question when going back and looking at it, what struck me so interesting over 20 or so samples of MMA trilogies extending in and out of the UFC, mind you, throughout all the weight classes and divisions is that the younger fighter, I know this is a common trend for MMA gamblers out there, not a surprise to you guys, but the younger fighter, John, comes on top of a trilogy over a 90 percentile clip in all divisions that aren't men's heavyweight or the female division. So pretty much everything in between, the younger fighter is either going 2 for 3 or 3-0.
90%. That's a trend. That's not like a slight little something to look at. Okay, so the younger fighter tends to be more successful in the trilogy overall. We're 1-1 right now, but correct me if I'm wrong. They're both 32 years old, right? So which one's the younger? Which one's the younger fighter? Because off the top of my head, you'd want to say it's Conor McGregor, right? But they're both 32. I don't know. Which one is the younger fighter?
Well, Conor will be 33 before Dustin later this year. Of course, they were actually born in different years, with Conor July, and of course, 1 year later, 89 in January, you have Dustin Poirier. So Poirier is the younger man for what that's worth.
You know what? That's crazy. I hadn't thought about that from breaking down the trilogy perspective. I do remember the last time they fought. I do remember that now, scratching my head and going, how is this possible that Dustin Poirier, who seems like the grizzled veteran at this point, you know, is the younger man? Okay, so that's a big one. I mean, listen, if you're just leaning towards trends, that's a big one. By the way, shout out to everybody that's watching in the YouTube chat. We appreciate it. I saw somebody giving a little shout out to not wearing a blue shirt. Sorry about that. We'll save it for game day. No question. Vancouver, we see you over there. Nice to know what's up. I'll give an early one before we keep going here. Euro says, we'll get a quick lean. Who you guys got, Bam Bam or the Prince of War? You got any thoughts on that big heavyweight matchup?
Wow, that's a real tough one, man. I'm going Bam Bam, but I'd be lying to you and the audience here, frankly, if I said I was confident in the outcome of that fight.
That's kind of pretty crazy, right? By the way, if you haven't seen Greg Hardy's Media Day session from earlier today, make sure you tune it in. Choice words for Derek Lewis. The man is not a Derek Lewis fan, to say the least. All right, so we talked about trilogies. You got that 90% trend right there. That's a big one. What about trilogies with quick turnarounds? You know what I mean? Obviously, not the entire trilogy is taking place in a quick span of time, but the second fight and the third fight, we're only talking about 6 months in between, right? So I guess not all trilogies are created the same, right? Because some are going to stretch across years. This is only a 6-month turnaround from fight 2 to fight 3. Does that impact anything when you're breaking this down in terms of, are there time to make adjustments? Are there not times to make adjustments? What do you think? Is there any overriding trend there?
I mean, it could be a tricky sample size. You can point to, rematches that kind of get muddied in with that because, albeit not a trilogy like we're talking about, a rematch can fit the same context of what you just said as far as a quick turnaround and with the, I don't want to say non-relevance, but with the overwhelming relevance of Poirier-McGregor 2 and compared to the first one, you can make those comparisons if you want to say Johnny Hendricks turnaround to defend the title against Robbie Lawler. Of course, Robbie Lawler had a fight in between that, or two, I believe, and it didn't work out for Hendricks. Or we stay in the lightweight division, John, with Maynard and Edgar. Of course, it was going to go, I believe, to Pettis, but with the draw, the heartbreak, and the crowd reaction, Dana White changed his mind, gave Gray Maynard another shot at UFC 136. Didn't work out for Gray, though. But what flips this sample size on all of its head is the sample size we're talking about. Conor McGregor himself. It was not a trilogy with Nate Diaz, but it was a quick turnaround within a relatively quick sign. So, I mean, aside from being the same guy, it's a relevant sample size outside of that. And what did Conor McGregor do? Well, that is the one time where he does win the decision. He makes adjustments. He fights smart. He takes some power off his shots. And still one of the most smartest I don't want to say underrated. I don't think any of his performances are. But if I had to say underrated, it's that one for sure.
From a technical perspective, I would agree with that as well. By the way, Boone and Alexander both chiming in with similar thoughts in the chat, and that is the Conor McGregor tricks are coming out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're starting to see the claws come back out. We'll see at the press conference. I imagine there'll be big things. That, of course, Thursday night. All right, so let's talk about the adjustments. After fight number 2 on Fight Island, Abu Dhabi, Conor basically came out and said, "Oh, those low kicks, man! I hadn't been training the low kicks. That one surprised me." And I think in a lot of ways it was kind of funny to hear him say it because at first glance you're like, what? I mean, did you not realize low kicks were a part of MMA? Like, I understand the calf kick is something kind of new, but people have always used that tactic, and by the way, it's been happening quite a bit lately. So I don't know. I guess when you heard him say that, I mean, you think about when Conor lost, he talks about like energy management, all this. Like, he's had some great observations in the moments after he loses, and he's so open and honest. That one to me struck me as a little bit weird. So I don't know. What did you take out of his admission, I guess, that the low kick surprised him? And when you went back and watched that in terms of making adjustments here, is that really the only thing that he needs to be concerned with? Is that really the primary focus of what he needs to be adjusting between fight 2 and fight 3?
I love that you set this up, John, because really it's two things. One, I think that many of us are putting too much weight into the low kick. Now, talking about our perspective, not Conor's, which I'll get to in a second, I believe it was the check right hook. Now, I picked the wrong person. I picked McGregor to win, but in my breakdown at MMAJunkie.com, you can still look at it, and I said that if Dustin Poirier can extend combinations and use that check right hook, then he can win this fight. And if you look, that is actually the turning point, I believe, in not just the finishing exchange, but as well as momentum shifts in round 1. Now, as far as McGregor's perspective of it, I think that people are good at picking out, and I don't want to say calling BS. Who are we to tell a fighter what they feel in there? But yes, come on, you're a dual champ in multiple organizations. You don't know what a leg kick is. We just saw him. We just cited Nate Diaz. He used it against Nate Diaz, and we saw him limp off the battlefield like other greats like John Jones. So we know he has the toughness and that poker face like a John Jones, where whether they're throwing or defending it, they can work through it. So why was Conor surprised? Well, John, when a lot of times, especially, maybe it's your old man who's got a lot of pride. He takes a spill at the family barbecue, and he's like, oh, and he starts blaming it on the rug. This rug here, it's this rug, right? But we all make mistakes. Maybe age gets the better of us. We let our guard down. It happens, but pride doesn't let us admit that. I think there was a lot of that there.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And, I think, we've heard from behind the scenes, and I think a lot of people have talked about it a little bit more openly as we've gotten close to this fight, that Conor was preparing for a boxing match at that time too, right? And he spent a lot of time focusing on primarily boxing, not just for the boxing match, but I'm sure he thought he could use it against Dustin Poirier as well. Certainly this time around, as you said, I imagine he'll be much more well-adjusted and much more well-prepared, I should say. We'll get to a question related to the calf kicks. I'm talking about that. Rick Atkins in the chat says, do you guys anticipate Conor implementing calf kicks himself? And I'll lead that to believe. Let's answer Rick's question first, and then I'll ask you as well to kind of follow up on that. What does Dustin adjust, right? Because does Dustin anticipate adjustments? So what do you think? Will Conor use calf kicks himself? And what do you think Dustin's going to do differently? Because it worked pretty dang good, last time out.
I feel like the Conor has the edge here because the adjustments are in his court. Dustin has kind of asserted the high ground. Now it's Conor's job to take it. And Rick, that's a great question. That's a really smart because I think that's the adjustment that Conor will make and the adjustment that Poirier may have to adapt to himself. Poirier, too, he is not beyond being susceptible to southpaw offense or leg kicks from either stance. We saw Justin Gaethje, orthodox, or Jim Miller, a fellow southpaw that Conor could replicate here. He did a lot of damage to Poirier's leg. So that's a very interesting note. And Poirier's stance as well, albeit different from Conor's, boxing centric. I think it'd be very hard for him to adjust that on the fly. I think Poirier kind of knows he's going to have to sacrifice his leg, and he kind of just works around it.
Yeah, Poirier points to that Miller fight a lot as the one that really kind of opened his eyes as to what's capable of being done there. Talking about the stance, so look at Pit of Blood, great username there. Pit of Blood wants to know, will Conor be in annihilate stance mode? So, we talk a lot over the years about Conor McGregor's stance, right? I mean, he does strike a very, very wide stance at times. That movement is, it's unique to him, and I think it's one of his biggest weapons. So what do you think? You touched base there on Dustin's stance. Does Conor need to adjust his stance, or do you see him making adjustment? I don't know if you like to go with the annihilate stance mode, but what do you think about his stance and what you expect to see round number one, how he walks forward?
I think I know what he means by the annihilate stance, and I'm surprised I don't touch on this more, being that what he's referring to is that more karate-based stance, the hopping in and out that we saw earlier in his career. And yes, even though you can argue it may be overblown, yes, he has gotten more flat-footed. Now, that can be good for a lot of things, like getting in and out from leg kicks, especially if you have good distance management like McGregor has. However, it ultimately comes down to feints. He's going to have to feint out both Dustin's defense and his offense. That's how he got the finish the first time around. It was actually not just that movement that is referred to as the annihilation footwork in the chat there, but it was the feints. If you look, Conor does a 1-1-2 that feints out the defense, opens up the kill shot, and bringing it back around to why the check hook was so popular. That stance won't really affect the check hook unless you have level changes or you roll under your crosses. Conor doesn't do either of those. And I posted a clip on my Twitter at DanTomMMA that shows how Dustin used that in the second fight, as well as Nate Diaz, another southpaw who defeated Conor. It was actually that check right hook that opened it up. So he's going to have to solve more than the stance if he wants to beat the tools of Dustin Poirier.
Yeah, a lot of justice to be made. By the way, let me shout out to Cold Coffee, Kenny Hathaway over there. Not only is he streaming you this beautiful image, but he's also the one that's alerting me about things that are going on here in the chat because it's tough for me to follow. So thank you, Cold Coffee. In fact, he's the one that gave me this. Stevie100, he said Conor thought he could walk through Dustin again like Cowboy. He will be more measured, I think, and use more counter-striking. What do you think about that analysis? Did he walk in there maybe a little too overconfident, a little too overblown, think he was going to run through Dustin? And while I would certainly agree more measured would make a lot of sense, we do think of him as a counter fighter in many ways. Do you think it's going to be based more around counter-striking?
I think it could be. Now, depending on who you ask, it might not be the smartest approach. That Conor ultimately is Conor who he is, and that he'll need to win early. However, again, we saw him flaunt the Nate Diaz sample. We saw him go 5 rounds on Fight Smart. I wouldn't be surprised, especially with all that was on the line. There was a lot on the line at UFC 202. I believe there's even more on the line tonight. So a conservative approach should not shock anybody if Conor goes that route.
You talked a lot about the adjustments, the X's and O's. The mentality does mean a lot. I mean, obviously, you're somebody that has stepped in there. You understand what it feels like. Mentality does play a big role in things. What about the fact, and this stood out to me so much, that Dustin said, the first time I fought him, there was this aura around him. Like, that was the rise of Conor. Man, if you weren't there for the rise of Conor, there was an aura around him where it's just like, who is this guy? Like, how does he accomplish these things? What is it that he has over everybody else? And of course it was the confidence that he had. Of course it was the mental warfare that he broke into as well. But Dustin said, I didn't feel that anymore. Like, I've seen the guy lose now. Like, now he's just a guy. You know what I mean? He's just another fighter. And yes, he's a really good fighter, and he's one that can knock you out with that powerful left hand. Dustin even said, man, the guy hits really hard. So, I don't think Dustin's writing anything off and saying like, oh, this guy can't clip me. He's nothing. But I think that, aura of invincibility around him, it is gone. Now we just see, it's been a while since that guy that destroyed Eddie Alvarez. You know what I mean? It's been a couple years, and we've seen some losses. So what do you think? You talked about the adjustments that need to be made from, an approach and an execution perspective, but mentally, does Dustin maybe have an edge now over a guy like Conor McGregor with that aura of invincibility gone?
Yeah, I love that you bring that up because it's dual layered. There's the classic aura of invincibility that you reference, and we've seen as fans and yourself covering the sport with Anderson Silva, right? You were covering, you were in the deep of it that time. You saw the change of just like fan perspective and fighter perspective alone, not taking any credit. There is something there. However, it goes dually deep because it's more about how does Conor feel, because he's coming off of a knockout loss. Now he's bounced back from submissions before and have gotten us to proverbially bounce back, as in believing in the McGregor, right? Because even when he was making the storm, he had losses when he came into the UFC. It wasn't that he had that level of invincibility, but with his style relied on his chin, and his ego also relied on that I've never been stopped, kind of a mentality. We've seen that. We've already seen Dustin come back from that, both from Conor and Michael Johnson. He's had to answer that. Now, we haven't seen Conor answer that, so that's the biggest mental intangible for me.
Yeah, no question. It's intriguing. Roberto Guillen chimes in the chat. He says, so this is not the press conference. No, this is not the press conference. Look, I know it looks like a couple of chiseled athletes just in their prime, ready to go at 155 pounds. But no. We're actually just journalists and fight analysts breaking down UFC 264. Mark Fellows chimed in and said, is this card worth me breaking my beerless, dry July for? Mark, absolutely. You're already 7 days into July. I mean, that's quite the accomplishment to go without a frosty beverage for 7 days. So, yes, consume frosty beverages at UFC 264. I guess we should make a pick, right? I mean, it's time. We'll talk about some other. There's a lot of things to talk about on this card because while all the attention is around the main event, understandably so, it's an event. This is actually a really, really good card. But leans, plays. I mean, obviously you're into the wagering side of things as well. And of course, we can do that here in Las Vegas. There's nothing wrong with that. But do you have? I mean, are you feeling absolutely convicted on any type of result in here, or is this? Does it feel like a fight that's kind of up in the air? Maybe you're just leaning one way or the other.
Outside of the stats that we covered here and some of the details we covered here, I do believe there's a lot in the direction that really solidifies my pick, which is for Poirier. And if you want to check that out, go over to MMAJunkie.com. But even with all those details and anything I can, bring up aside, John, to be honest, us media, we're kind of the most guilty when it comes to overcorrecting that steering wheel, right? And is that what I'm doing here with this Dustin pick? I don't know who you picked. I can't remember in staff picks off the top of my head, but are we overcorrecting the steering wheel like we can do sometimes?
Here's what I'm saying right now is that I do feel like, listen, Dustin Poirier, the activity level, just what he's been through. You talk about the tests that he's gone through, the things that he's done. It just feels, for all the things that you say right now, that this is Dustin Poirier's time, more or less, and again, not taking away the X and O's adjustments that can be made, but no, I'm leaning towards Dustin Poirier as well. But what makes it so hard for me is this is Conor McGregor, and he does these things, right? And it is still, maybe the aura of invincibility is gone, but he does still have the ability to do these amazing things. And as silly as it sounds as well, getting back inside T-Mobile Arena with a sold-out building. This is a guy that I feel really does feed off energy like that. And, we've been talking to fighters over the year, but especially recently, at these fight events, and beforehand, we talked to guys and gals as well, and we're like, crowd's back in the building. Yeah, I'm excited about it. But then you speak to them afterwards, and they're like, you have no idea how much difference that made. I didn't necessarily even realize how much I missed that crowd being gone. And if there's ever a guy who's going to respond to the bright lights, now again, it's one of those things where it's an intangible, right? But it does seem to be an intangible that matters to me because Conor McGregor just delivers in these big spots. I'm leaning towards Dustin Poirier as well, but to sit here and say, hey, man, put the mortgage on Dustin, Conor has no chance. He's a big fight guy. This is a big fight. This is a big moment. And how about the fact that, he's kind of clicking back into bad guy Conor mode again, right? All the, hey, buddy, let me, how your hot sauce sure is fantastic, buddy. What a professional. That's gone. And I do think Conor does need a little bit of that edge. I do think he needs to have a little bit of that, I hate your guts and I'm not going to let you hold that over me. So does any of that give you pause at all in your pick?
I agree. John, I can be guilty of being too much of a purist for sure. But even when I went to look at them touch gloves in the rematch, I'm like, this guy is way too happy. He's touching the glove. He had a chipper attitude. I'm like, this isn't Conor. So I completely agree in sentiment what you're saying. And, say what you will. Even myself, who can feel that a lot of his trash talk is a bit tired. Hey, say what you will. Every time I see Dustin Poirier's name, I keep saying it Dusty Reed in my eyes. So, say what you will. What he does bleeds through at some level.
That is hilarious. Listen, a couple picks there. Bondfish said this is a fight where I would have picked Dustin, but for some reason I have a feeling Conor is going to win. That's the weird thing. That's what I'm saying, where it's like you feel like it's the right pick. We just saw it 6 months ago, but Conor does have the ability to make adjustments. And again, you just have these feelings he delivers in moments like this. Rick Atkins says, I'm a diehard McGregor fan, but I'm going with Poirier. I don't like the 6-month turnaround for McGregor after getting knocked out. So much of his style is dependent on his chin. Take a shot to land a shot. And that's an interesting aspect that we hadn't even talked about as well. I was thinking about the 6-month turnaround in terms of, is that really enough time for you to make the adjustments that you need to make? But listen, there's something to be said for that too. I mean, we've seen it over the course of MMA history, right? Sometimes when you get knocked out, more time away is a better thing for you.
I completely agree. That's a great point. We talked about how his style cruxes on it, his confidence. But yeah, what about his style? Like they just mentioned, right? And 6 months, I feel like the ring rust of 12 months or 9 months, I feel like we talk less about that, and for good reason. A lot of these layoff fighters have been doing good, by the way. Mm-hmm. However, I do believe 6 months is an appropriate fault line as far as when we see fighters come back too soon from head trauma.
Interesting. All right, Crispy Crinzy says Conor's going to win easy. Boyke says Conor KO round 1. So there's people feeling all over it, and that's why this is going to be one of the biggest pay-per-views in UFC history, because that's what it's all about. You got the biggest star in the sport in Conor McGregor, a polarizing figure that some people absolutely love and some people absolutely detest. You got Dustin Poirier, which I think pretty much is universally loved by everybody. If you don't like Dustin Poirier, you take a hard look in the mirror. What's wrong with you? But like you said, the adjustments that can be made and what's on the line here. And I guess, what is on the line is a shot at the UFC's undisputed lightweight title. We know Charles Oliveira is going to be in the building. Dustin Poirier wins. No arguments there, right? I mean, the guy could have already fought for the title. He elected to do this, which was take the money fight, understandably so. Conor McGregor, I know it may make you mad, but they're going to give him a title shot if he wins. All right, so sorry about you, everybody. I apologize to you, Justin Gaethje. It's just going to happen, It's probably going to be a title fight, so that's what's on the line. Okay, listen, we spent a lot of time talking about the main event. We might even try some more. If anybody has some more opinions or thoughts or questions about it, be happy to answer those as well. But we do need to talk about the co-main event as well, because it's not getting, of course, nearly as much attention. It never could, but it's a big one at 170 pounds. Maybe not clear stakes on the line, because it does sound like Colby Covington is going to be next for the title shot. They're going to do that rematch with Kamaru Usman later this year. And then you've got, Leon Edwards is certainly in the mix there. Gilbert Burns wins. He just come off the loss. I don't know. It's a little too soon to turn around. But Stephen Wonderboy Thompson wins. We've already heard Usman and his manager Ali Abdelaziz say, hey, what about that guy? He's kind of the fresh meat, so to speak. We haven't had that fight yet. Certainly a possibility of a title shot. If not next, at least coming up very soon. We spoke to Wonderboy, and he said, dude, if I win, why would I not be at the top of the list? He was actually pretty frustrated that Covington was the one with the shot. But he did say, well, if somebody gets hurt, things happen. So big stakes, but it's a big fight, but more interesting to me, it's an intriguing clash of styles, right? I mean, this is as close to old school MMA as you're going to get, right? You got the dangerous jiu-jitsu stylist in Gilbert Burns. Certainly has knockout power as well, but I can't imagine, there's a single coach in Gilbert Burns' camp saying, as we lay out this game plan, we really need to rely on our striking. I think that's where we've got the edge over Stephen Thompson. Meanwhile, you got Stephen Thompson who says the same thing. He's, look, my jiu-jitsu is better than people think, but I know what got me here. It's my karate. So talk to me about this fight. Does this clash of styles intrigue you as much as I think it intrigues me? And do you see somebody with an edge, or is it just about who can implement their game plan, right? If it stays on the feet, it's Wonderboy. If it goes to the ground, it's Gilbert. Is it that easy?
It should be that easy, because you're right. I think Gilbert does need to return to his roots, lean on all the coaching that Greg Jones has been giving him over the years, and the coaching that he's been giving himself as one of the grappling sources over there with the Black Zillions, now Sanford MMA, of course, right? But this is great because I feel like it's got a lot of themes to the main event that we just broke down where spoiler alert, I'm probably siding with my guy Stephen Thompson here because of his ability to fight lead hand from a southpaw stance. I think that's going to do well on a pressuring opponent. But here's the thing is, the one time I did pick against Stephen Thompson, because we know I've got the Kempo karate bias here, right? I got to admit that up front. But I picked against him when he fought Vicente Luque. And you know who was in the corner when he fought Vicente Luque? It was Gilbert Burns. And he saw what he did to Vicente Luque, his brother, who, all respect to Burns and the deserved credit he deserves for his improvements. But Luque is more composed, more durable, and more nuanced on the feet. He even has a little bit of background in traditional martial arts from his mother's side as far as the karate. Burns does not have those things. So he really needs to focus on getting it to the ground. But here's the problem, and it's kind of apropos since, we're we're here in the Apex, but the fights won't be going down in the Apex. It's going in the T-Mobile Arena. And what's the big difference? The big cage. That's right. And that usually favors the striker generally if you're trying to make a coin flip fight. That's a deciding factor for me when it gets close. In this case, I really do feel like it's going to hurt Burns' chances, who likes to get his takedowns against that cage.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, you give Wonderboy a little bit more room to move, a little bit more time. So Bruce says, what is Thompson's key to success in this fight? I mean, you talked about it. Is it sprawl and scramble, basically? Is that it? I mean, what is the key to getting it done for Wonderboy?
It's essentially going to be using every inch of that big cage to move laterally, footwork, and circling with his jab. He did that a lot with jabs and left hooks, depending on what stance he was when he fought Luque. And I think if he can do it to a guy as skilled as nuanced as Luque, he should be able to do it to Burns. However, he can't get lazy with those jabs because Maia kind of got lazy with the jab. And we saw Burns in his last victory, beautiful left hook right over the southpaw shoulder. So, that could happen to Thompson too here.
Interesting. All right. Earlier, Antoine Willis chimed in and said, what are you guys looking forward to the most on Saturday night? Let's take the main event out of it, right? Because I guess what I'm looking forward to most is Conor McGregor walking in front of a full crowd again. I mean, there's just something special about those moments. Like I said, biggest star in the history of the sport, no question about it. Crowds are buzzing. It's a different feel when Conor McGregor is fighting. And, no offense to the limited crowd that was available on Fight Island. They made it as loud as they could, but it's just not the same as an absolutely packed venue. So, I mean, I'm really, really looking forward to that. And then, of course, the conclusion of the fight itself. But is there another fight up and down this card? Because I think there's a lot of really interesting matchups on here, both in terms of name value, in terms of style. I won't steal any of them. I'll let you have the full list, and I'll throw mine out there. What's one or even a couple, if you want to, that you're most looking forward to?
Well, I think I know who you're going to go, so I'll go the other way. I'll lean in my contrarian technical roots here. I got to give Ilia Topuria and Ryan Hall a shout. I mean, two grapplers by trade, but Topuria also has a quiet Greco-Roman base, which hopefully he uses and doesn't try to follow up with that trash talk, because grappling with Hall, even at this stage of his career, mistake.
Yeah, it's interesting. You touched on it. I am actually really looking forward to that one too. Ryan Hall is such a unique character in the sport, both in terms of just how he is as a person, but then of course his game is so unique. But I've been really impressed by what I've seen from Topuria thus far.
Yeah.
But as you said, I mean, he came in today and it's just like, I don't see anything special in Ryan Hall. He said, maybe you guys see something special. He's like, I don't see it. He's a grappler, but I'm with a lot of great grapplers. I'm like, hopefully that's a little bit of showmanship, because I do think Topuria could go with Hall, but don't go to the match them if you don't have to, right?
Yeah, if I heard that, I would have brought in one of those old school, like when we were in school, they wheeled in the TV when you're going to watch a movie, and I would pop in the tape of Jamal Hill just a couple weeks ago going, I can grapple with Paul Craig. What's the problem?
Very good point there. Look, this is the easy one here, but as far as one of the ones you're looking for, I mean, how can Michelle Pajeda and Nico Price not just be absolute insanity, right? I mean, both as soon as they match this fight up, as soon as they announce it, you're like, this is craziness versus craziness. Unbelievable fight. I think it's going to be madness. Nico Price, by the way, crazy, because today the Nevada State Athletic Commission announces they're no longer going to punish fighters for marijuana usage. That's on the day that Nico Price is coming back from a suspension for marijuana usage. He had to pay a fine as well, which I think is ridiculous. And I'm so happy the commission's no longer testing for that and punishing for that. But Nico actually said, look, I took that positive test as a sign. He's like, I'm spending a lot of money on marijuana. I had to spend money on this on paying the commission, and I've been sober ever since. I haven't smoked at all since then. And he's like, I am a new man. You guys thought I was wild before. Wait till you see me now. I mean, I've got even greater cardio. I'm even crazier. So it's going to be nuts. That's a great one. Carlos Condit. I mean, anytime the Natural Born Killer is back in there against Max Griffin. Max Griffin, a guy who I think probably doesn't get the respect he deserves for his record. He's had like a couple of really close fights, but he makes for exciting matchups. So all those are exciting. We touched on it a little bit earlier. Greg Hardy versus Tai Tuivasa. You can't tell me somebody's not going to sleep in that one. I'm going to say that, and it's going to be like Derek Lewis, Francis Ngannou. You got to see this. There's somebody going. Yeah, but I think that'll be a lot of fun. Daniel Silva chimed in and said, "What's your take on Sugar's new opponent?" And I'll let you give your thoughts, Dan. I don't know how much you've had a chance to watch of Chris Moutinho, but Chris Moutinho's last fight was in Cage Fury Fighting Championships, which where I do broadcasting work with CM Punk on UFC Fight Pass. So I had a chance to see his last fight before he stepped in, and it was a phenomenal performance. I didn't necessarily think the UFC was going to be taking a look at him just because his career record at 9-4 doesn't leap off the page at you. You know what I mean? But he did have some early career losses against some very proven talent, and the kid can scrap. I mean, his CFFC fight was fantastic. Listen, It's a tall order. It's a tough order. I as much as people love to hate on Sean O'Malley and don't like, listen, I think the guy is gifted, man. I think he's a phenomenal fighter, and I think this is going to be a tough one for Chris Moutinho. But, it's one of those situations where Chris won't say he has nothing to lose, but honestly, he has nothing to lose. You know what I mean? You're coming in here. You're not supposed to be here. You're in the UFC. You're on the pay-per-view main card. If you do anything at all, it pays out in your favor. You're not having to think about this for a long time. There's not pressure. It's a great opportunity. So, listen, I'll tell you, I think Chris Moutinho is better than just a cursory indication of his record would look. And I think that he has full belief in himself, and he's not intimidated by facing a guy like Sean O'Malley. But it's still a tough fight. Sean O'Malley is a very gifted striker. And not too bad at grappling either.
No, he's not, and it's he's an action fighter from what I can tell from Chris Moutinho. So I can't speak too much as far as his record, because the record can be deceiving, especially when you have such an action style. But here's what I do like: he comes from that New England cartel scene with Tyson Chartier, who was a MMA Junkie's co-coach along with Eric Nixick. But more specifically, if you're gonna take on Sean O'Malley, you better hope you have some long range strikers to maybe work with on a regular basis. And if this kid came up working with guys like Calvin Kattar or Rob Font, a striker that's very long, who I'm very high on in the division, I think that's got to, at least do something for his confidence here, to where he's not just coming in a big show. He's faced those UFC names in the room, some of that length, but in that arena with these fans, man, it's going to be different. It's not going to be the easier. Not that any debut is easy, by the way, but it's not going to be like the pandemic debuts, let's say. They're getting the full UFC experience,
No doubt about it. I cannot wait for Saturday night. Listen, it's not UFC 264 related, but I just want to acknowledge that a lot of people are saying, hey, man, we got Dan Tom here. Break us down a little bit. Give us some early leans or some early just feelings on Nick Diaz versus Robbie Lawler 2. That fight is in the works. It's not necessarily official yet, so let's not get too excited. I hate to say this, but anytime a Diaz name is brought into a fight matchup, I say let's wait until we get an official announcement and we get a bout agreement. But just give us your thoughts when you heard this today. A, I guess, did it excite you? And B, where do you feel these guys are in their career? I mean, it's been a long time since we've seen Nick Diaz. I mean, does that concern you right off the top, or do you feel like he's a guy that can deal with layoffs like this?
I was prepared to just kind of start putting water on any kind of Nick Diaz announcement whenever it finally came around, because we've been waiting forever. But this is the kind of matchups I like. I like guys at kind of this stage of their career. For all the questions we have about Nick, and maybe they might not be as much, but we still have a lot about Robbie. You could argue that Robbie maybe is more toward the end of that career with the miles that he's accrued and the activity that he's had. So maybe does the activity help him? But you know me, John, southpaw versus southpaw stats is my thing, and I can't help but think of not just the last time they met, but the Diaz brothers in general, tend to do good against southpaws. We referenced Nate versus Connor. Nate had his moment against Leon despite losing, and Robbie tends to, not do as good. He lost to RDA later in his career, early in his career to Nick, midway in his title run career. Johnny Hendricks gave him some tough fights, another southpaw there. So, despite the layoff, I think stylistically, Nick may have some things coming into this. We'll see what condition he's in, though.
I'm intrigued. I'm not going to commit to it and get too excited just yet until we get an official announcement. This we're kind of wrapping up, but Cold Coffee shared a series of questions here from Destiny Chamberlain that are good. It says, do you ever see Doo Ho Choi rising to the top 10 at 145? That's question number one. I think Doo Ho Choi certainly has the ability to be there. What about you?
I do, but I feel like we'd be disrespecting another Choi who's been really active in making his mark, and that's Sang-Woo Choi, man. It's another stud that's just coming out of that country, South Korea there.
Yeah.
So no disrespect to Doo Ho Choi. Obviously, we have a lot of high hopes from him, but I think that we need to temper those a bit, and maybe give some love to Sang-Woo Choi.
I'm super high on Sang-Woo Choi, man. If you haven't been watching his career, it's been fun. All right, here's question number 2. Who wins now between Aldo and Conor at 145? Now, the key to me there is 145, because I think at this point in his career, Conor would be, I hate to say the words near death, but yeah, I think he would be so dehydrated at that point. Conor at 145 would not be healthy, if I'm being honest with you.
I agree. It would not be healthy. But if we were to, let's do the hypothetical and we'll put them at their healthiest, and let's say they're there, right?
Weight cut is perfect. They nutrition down. Everything's good.
Now, let me say that I picked Conor the first time, not assuming that Jose Aldo would, kind of out of character come at him like that. And now, that being said, I still predicted Conor to win inside the distance for what that's worth, because there are some things to southpaws that, do give Jose trouble, hence why Peter Yan had to switch there to get his success in their title fight. That being said, I actually may go with Aldo at this point. I do feel like his defensive layers, particularly the boxing that he focused on, would serve him well against another fighter who is, like we just mentioned, has been, a little bit too much into their own boxing.
No question about it. Last one. Who's the better pure striker,
Mm-hmm.
Wonderboy or Stylebender?
This one that's been coming up a lot. It's real tough. My Kempo karate bias really wants me to go Wonderboy here. And I feel like it's copping out if I go on. I feel like it's even. Okay, I feel like it's even. But if you're gonna put a gun to my head, my bias will bleed through, and I will go Wonder Boy. But I feel like those two are even, and I'm not gonna weigh in on who's the best striker.
That's one of those impossible choices, right? That's
Yeah,
one of
it's
those
tough.
the hypotheticals that somebody
Yes.
gives you where you can't make it go either way.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, listen, we went to a little bit of overtime, but there was some fun questions, so I appreciate you chiming in. It is UFC 264 this week. It is the big one. I think we're both leaning towards Dustin Poirier in the main event, but we're also both a little bit cautious in saying put the mortgage payment on that one because Conor McGregor seems to deliver in these big moments. It's going to be a big one. That's all I can say. Don't miss it. Whether you watch it at home, or whether you go somewhere out and watch it, this is one of those enjoyable moments of the sport. You know what I mean? For all those times you say, "Oh, this fight night card just isn't doing it for me." You know what I mean? How can you complain about this? The biggest star in the sport, incredibly meaningful trilogy fight, pumped up, Las Vegas, T-Mobile Arena. Full crowd. I'm telling you, it's going to be exciting. I cannot wait. UFC 264. Keep with MMA Junkie. We'll have it broken down all week long.